The G7 emergency meeting on Afghanistan Tuesday failed to come up with a solution, and now the clock is ticking for people waiting to be evacuated at Kabul airport, as President Joe Biden has ruled out extending the troops' pullout deadline. Is Afghanistan racing towards new turbulence after August 31st? And in other news, President Joe Biden's intelligence report on tracing the origins of the coronavirus has also reportedly drawn a blank. When will scientists' warnings be heeded in this atmosphere of distrust? Welcome to The Point, coming to you from Beijing. I'm Wang, sitting in for Liu Xin. The much-awaited G7 emergency meeting on Afghanistan ended in minutes, without concrete results, except that U.S. President Joe Biden confirmed again that August 31st will be the deadline for his troops to pull out of Afghanistan, and that deadline will not be extended. EU members fear that another refugee crisis, while the Taliban are now warning against further evacuation of Afghan nationals. Is the country headed for fresh turbulence when the deadline ends? Can Kabul airport, the only way out of Afghanistan by air right now, remain operational without American troops and operators? How are the regional players going to present some effective solutions? Joining me today are Professor Wang of the Northwest University of China from Xi'an, and also Professor Josef Mahoney of the East China Normal University, currently in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome, sir, to The Point. There are reports of the former Afghan vice president leading armed resistance in the country's north. There are fears of fresh turbulence, of bloodshed, and perhaps there is a larger crisis looming, that is an economic crisis. I have some staggering figures here. The World Bank says 40% of Afghanistan's GDP relies on foreign aid, and now that is expected to be slashed by around 20%. And the U.S. has reportedly frozen around $9 billion assets of the Afghan Central Bank, and the IMF and the European Commission have also put their funds on hold. With all this happening, how can Afghanistan tackle its economic crisis? Let me start with you, Joseph.
Well, you're right. There are quite a number of problems that are mounting, and you know, it's one thing to win power militarily. It's another thing to govern in this incredible vacuum and collapse. And you know, we are seeing an economic collapse. Indeed, there are some suspicions that a lot of the people who are trying to get out are not necessarily politically endangered. They're just trying to escape the economic chaos and the risk of hunger, if not starvation. But yes, the frozen aid, the frozen accounts, the collapsed government, the insurgency growing in the north, politically endangered people, including women, chaotic evacuations, and international abandonment. You know, we saw a lot of the Western powers and others abandon their foreign missions. So yes, all of this is presenting a number of existential crises for whoever is going to exercise power. And you know, one of the things that we don't even talk about, even though the rest of the world is talking about, is what's the COVID situation currently in Afghanistan, and how is that contributing to this catastrophe?
Right. Professor Wang, what do you think? How do you think the economic situation right now may complicate the already volatile situation politically over there in Afghanistan?
We have to know that the economic situation inside Afghanistan is always very negative. Even when the United States led international forces were there, under the assistance of international society, especially the United States and its allies, the economic situation is not very positive. So, but the problem is that I think a very pressing problem to tackle with economic situation that Afghanistan should set up kind of the government that widely accepted by international society. We have to know. I want to stress here that we have to know that legally there is still no kind of government, because it's still in a kind of anarchy status inside Afghanistan. Although Afghan Taliban control the city of Kabul, the capital of the country, but no legal government has been set up. It's still under the process of discussion and still on the process of formation. So actually, I think the very priority for Afghanistan right now, if they want to really have the capability to get the assistance of international society, and also they have the capability to tackle with the economic situation, I think the very first priority is to set up the kind of the legal government accepted and recognized by the international society. Wang.
Right, talking about the political situation, there are some new developments or potential new developments. Two major international news outlets have reported that U.S. Central Intelligence Agency Chief William Burns met with Taliban leaders in Kabul earlier this week. The White House, unsurprisingly, has not confirmed this. Joseph, does this piece of news strike you as credible or conceivable? What would be CIA's interests or roles currently in Afghanistan?
Well, I think it's clear that the Biden administration had to have some sort of discussion with the Taliban, given we have had ongoing bilateral talks with them since the Trump administration. But Biden has been a little colder and less direct with them. But given the way the Taliban came into the capital, given the incredible changes in the security posture facing Americans and American troops, given the difficulty of ensuring the evacuation, there needed to be some sort of high-level discussion. And it's not surprising to me that that Biden sent the head of the CIA. This is someone who can keep his mouth shut, who isn't going to talk about things. And whenever we start dealing with spies, they tend to even deny that the meetings took place. But the Taliban themselves, the spokesman appeared to not confirm, but also not deny that the meeting took place. And I suspect they were simply discussing how they were going to handle what is essentially an American retreat.
Right, CIA has a track record of playing a covert role, globally, be it Central and South America or the Middle East, or even Asia. Professor Wang Jing, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, has been in talks with his counterparts in Britain, Italy, Turkey, and the Netherlands, stressing that measures in Afghanistan should be, quote-unquote, Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. How should we understand this? And do you think the West will follow that principle? Because, to be honest, there are domestic divisions out there. And do you think the Sharia-led principle will be accepted by all factions, all forces within the Afghan society?
I think China's stance is always very clear. It's always very important to the international society's manners towards Afghanistan issue. That is, as you say, Wang Guan, the Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. And also it means that every country should respect the willingness of Afghanistan's people, and every country should respect the sovereignty, integrity, and the independence of the country. So this is a very fundamental principle that every country, I mean, not only China, but also the rest of the international society, that if they want to really settle the disputes and the problem inside Afghanistan, we have to know that these countries, that the Western countries, and also the Turkey, they are the very important, or they are actually the kind of important players inside Afghanistan. For example, some of the countries, they had military presence in Afghanistan, such as Turkey, and some of them supported Afghan government, and some of them still kept the very hesitation attitudes towards the Afghan Taliban. They really doubt whether or not Afghan Taliban can keep their words, on whether or not the Afghan Taliban can maintain the government. So this is a very important for China to exchange the idea with every Afghan issue-related country, and also it means that China hopes to do something to help Afghan Taliban to go back to the international society, but there were some kind of the message has already been expressed by China towards Afghan Taliban. I mean, before our state councilor Wang Yi met with the representative of Afghan Taliban in Tianjin, I mean, months ago. So I think China is trying to balance the ties with different parties and bring them together, and hope to help everybody to reach the kind of the point that will finally benefit everyone. Wang Guan.
Yeah, thank you for shedding light on the Chinese perspectives here. It's really important to get all sides of the story. Joseph, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in his phone call with British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said the international community should encourage and guide Afghanistan in a positive direction instead of exerting excessive pressure. Great Britain, for example, is pushing to continue the evacuations even after the U.S. pullout. I mean, is it feasible? What are other Western pressures out there on Afghanistan?
Well, just to follow a little bit, arguably since the 1970s, the biggest problem for Afghanistan has been repeated foreign interventions. And this was not a new problem. It goes back, we can go back historically to the 100-year game that took place as Russia and the UK during their more imperialistic years were competing for position there. So I think what the real key point here is that we're seeing with the UK that proposed perhaps sanctions during the G7 be considered, and we're seeing a lot of sort of negative diplomacy from Blinken. What we're seeing are these negative pressures that are trying to create positive incentives instead of really reaching out and saying, what can we do to help this situation? Because we're in part responsible for it, and we don't need to make it worse by holding you to standards that we couldn't even realize when we were there, and that if this continues to deteriorate, will create worse conditions for everyone, including those people that we hope will survive and be protected during this difficult period.
Yeah, Professor Wang, Foreign Minister Wang Yi said, and I quote, China is willing to continue to play a constructive role in the Afghan issue without interfering in its domestic affairs, internal affairs. China said this principle many, many times over the past years and decades. How do you think this statement will apply to today's Afghanistan in particular?
I think China will still obey, still keep its words, keep our promises, because actually China's stance over Afghanistan issue is very clear that any intervention from the outside powers, although some of the intervention from the perspective of certain outside powers or external powers might be very positive, but actually if intervention goes into the internal affairs of Afghanistan, it actually leads to the opposite sides of the original idea. So that becomes very negative for the local situation and internal problem of Afghanistan. So I think China actually hopes that everybody of the international society can really have the good willingness to cooperate with each other, coordinate our actions, and then to help assist the Afghan people, but under the respect of their sovereignty, under the respect of the Afghans' independence of the country. So I think this should be the only way out to help Afghan people out of the chaos, out of the stability right now, what is happening right now.
Yeah, we've seen the might of U.S. interventionism in Afghanistan and elsewhere. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much, Professor Wang Jing from Northwest University and Professor Josef Mahoney from East China Normal University. Now we'll take a short break, but stay with us and stay tuned for more on the coronavirus controversy.